Has the Royal Hotel swayed you in any direction on wanting to visit Australia?
No, I'd still go to Australia.
Yeah.
I'm someone who would travel anywhere in the world. There isn't a place that I wouldn't go.
Even with the giant snakes everywhere.
Even with the giant snakes anywhere.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with Australia. I think my biggest fear is like what lives on the island and the spiders and the snakes and every deadly animal to ever lives on that freaking that island. So
yeah,
I just wouldn't be caught in a situation where I'm in a very barren land of Australia where it's desert and no reception.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things that could lead into it. And I just could not be in that type of control where I can get myself out of.
Hello and welcome to the movie podcast at TIFF. My name is Daniel and this is our review of The Royal Hotel. Joining alongside me today, checking in to the movie podcast review, it's Shahbaz.
Hello, mate.
And it's Anthony.
Ding, ding, ding. I parked my kangaroo outside.
What accent was that?
I'm glad it only took us about 30 seconds to get stereotypical accents and Australian isms in here, which is, I think, it's a good record for us, right? I think is that the fastest we've gone into just the hijinks of the show?
No, I think I've started an episode right away with an accent. That's possible.
Yeah, I think you've said hello in an accent just right away.
Yeah.
My reasoning is as much as I can do in the next 5 minutes to piss everyone off, I will do.
Oh. Like the Australians?
No. Just the ones that will comment, you guys take too long to get to the review.
Okay, got you.
Those
We're
people.
coming for those people. For those
our
people.
producers, supposedly, that they won't pay us. Seem to have a lot of opinions on our show.
They do, here's the thing. If you're paying us money, well, maybe we'll start to listen to what you're doing.
Yeah,
that's a whole other thing. Today, we're at TIFF. This is one of the many TIFF reviews that we'll have coming your way. And we're having a great time at TIFF so far. I mean, we're seeing a lot before the festival even starts. It's a bit of madness already for us. So yeah, we're just happy to be at another year at TIFF, another year there, and have a lot more fun stuff coming your way. So make sure you're following us on all social media platforms at The Movie Podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you have Discord, or if you're thinking about joining Discord, join Discord. We have an amazing Discord community of movie lovers, of entertainment lovers. We're having lots of great conversations in there. So you don't want to miss any of that. Join our Discord. Everything you need is in the show notes below. Like a lot of our episodes at the Toronto International Film Festival is brought to you by MUBI. Stay tuned later in the show to hear how you get a whole month free of incredible cinema. You don't want to miss it. Again, if the link for that is in our show notes below, but we're going to tell you a lot more about that later on in the episode. Today is all about The Royal Hotel. This is directed by Kitty Green and it stars Julia Garner and Jessica Henwick, who we've also known from a lot of other big projects, obviously. Jessica Henwick just being in The Matrix and was it Iron Fist and so many other films. She's popping up ever Glass Onion, which was another TIFF film last year. And then Julia Garner, obviously from Inventing Anna and from Ozark and reteaming now with Kitty from The Assistant. And now here we are talking about The Royal Hotel, which is a story of two friends who run out of cash while backpacking in Australia and must take jobs in an exploitative pub to fund their trip home. Let's get right into it. I know we have a lot of thoughts on this movie. I'm going to kick it over to Shahbaz for his first thoughts on the film.
I didn't know what to expect with this movie. And we saw that it was elevation. We saw that it was neon. And the vibe of the film when it first kind of starts, it's like, oh, it's a little happy. Okay, they seem to be like, these two backpackers who are having a good time. And I'm like, oh, this is the perfect synopsis and setup for some hijinks that are going to be like horror or suspenseful. And the movie, it takes a while. And when it finally starts to get to what feels like it's going to be the big payoff of what we've been waiting for, it immediately cuts it short. It starts to build up and build up and build up suspense and then immediately just dissolves instantly. And the whole film just kind of has this way of going about where nothing really matters. And I kept kind of wondering, like, what is the point of this movie? Like, where are we going to go with these characters? They also the characters don't really seem like the type of people that, you know, we met in the beginning of the film. They're almost like they're swapping their roles. Like one is being more responsible while the other one is not being as responsible. And then it just kind of goes from there. They go to this very remote desert place in Australia where they have no reception. And I'm like, oh, no reception. Here we go. They can't call for help.
That's the premise, yes. Because I mean, like they're in the beginning, like you said, Shay, like they're in Sydney.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, we're in like that's where people go in Australia, and then they get a job in the most desolate of locations. You're like, okay, where is this going to go?
And then everyone's kind of shady. They have like these snakes in jars inside of these like alcohol, like in a bar. And I'm like, oh man, like this is gonna be cool. Like they're gonna get like.
I think that's just how alcohol is in Australia.
Probably. I mean, I've definitely seen it at bars and stuff too. But it's just like I kept waiting for what the point of this film is, and by the end of this movie I still don't know. There's definitely some themes that you can pick up about how women feel around men who are just inherently creepy, but it's still not enough. There doesn't seem to be a real point to the film. It just kind of moves on from scene to scene, building a slight bit amount of tension while then immediately releasing it because it has no payoff to those moments. I think the performances are great here. I mean, like they're all doing a good job, but it again doesn't matter. And that's the thing where I'm kind of left off this film, where I was like, okay, I watched it, but now what? Like, what do I take away from this film? Did I feel entertained during it? No, not really. Was I happy with the ending of it? Not really either, because it just has this weird blockbuster style ending at the very end of the film where it feels like that's where the budget of the movie went. And you're like, well, why did any of this need to happen? So I just felt kind of, I think, let down or disappointed, or just kind of like, well, what did I come to see?
Yeah, and I think it's all kind of what you leave with, how a movie leaves you, what message it leaves you with. And I think the Royal Hotel does a really good job of putting you in the perspective of these two young women who are going to this, you know, remote location and trying to, get money and make their way. And, you know, we've all had friends who have gone to Europe or gone to different countries and started, you know, and wanted to, you know, start their lives or do something different and be out there and find these jobs. You know, I think of a friend of mine who comes to mind who literally thought they were going to like London, and they actually were like 3 or 4 hours outside of London, England to work. Right. And it's like, that's definitely a shock when you get there. Like, oh, you feel like you're going to go to a different country and you're going to get this experience where really you're going into like the most like outback that you could get. Right. And, you know, these two girls are now working in this pub. And like, as we said in the synopsis and what Shay was talking about, like you are surrounded by men who are just constantly feeling like predators. And I think what the Royal Hotel does a really good job of is making you feel unsafe in this situation. Because I think every scene of this movie makes me feel like, I don't want to be here. Why are they still here? Like, it makes no sense why they would stay there and want to put up with it. Because you're like, these people aren't changing and they feel very predatory. And I feel like this movie is constantly leading me down a path of something is right around the corner. Something big is about to happen, but then it never really does a payoff. And that's what Shay was saying. And that's why I so agree with that, where it just feels like I'm just constantly being led down this dark corridor, and you're going to turn a corner and you're expecting a jump scare. And I'm not saying a jump scare literally, you're just expecting something like consequences for the actions that are going on. But it never feels like those consequences come. And maybe I'm trying to think is that supposed to be like a parable for like how, you know, men are never have consequences put on them for things that they do. But it also just feels like these two girls never have any urgency to want to get out, not at least until towards the very end of the film. Anthony, jump on in.
Yeah, that's how I also kind of had that feeling of this movie is just a big tease to something suspenseful that never happens. And I don't know if that was the idea for this movie from Kitty to tell this theme of like, this is what women will feel like in a situation where a town is completely run by men and it's and inhabited by men. But it also is a situation where they put themselves in. And I felt like there was times where there were moments of horrorness and eeriness to it to generate some sort of action from these characters, and nothing happens. And like Shay and like Daniel said, that there's a lot of that kind of builds and builds and builds, and you kind of at the end of the movie you're frustrated because you wanted something to happen and get them to enact and to be I don't know, they were, take out an axe and start chopping things, like there's something that needs to be done. And it never happens. And the performances are great. Like Jessica Henwick and Julie Garner, they're great at being those roles, but I feel like there was something more, and I don't know, like, what was the purpose of me watching this? What I would love to understand it. I would love to get the director's opinion and kind of understand why she made this film, but I just couldn't get into why was this made? What did they want to tell me? And what did you want me to leave with? Because when I left, I was actually frustrated and a little bit annoyed because there was so much of that tease that kind of builds up, and there's so many of these elements that could lead to a story. And it was almost like I want another movie from this movie. Like I wanted something else to happen other than what we got.
I want to unpack that a little bit more, but before we do, I do want to kick it over to our friends and the sponsor of today's episode, MUBI.
This episode of the MUBI Podcast is brought to you by MUBI, a global curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe.
From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there is always something new to discover. Some recent MUBI releases include Park Chan-wook's Decision to Leave, Leia Mesias's The Five Devils, and Lars von Trier's The Kingdom Trilogy.
With MUBI, each and every film is hand-selected. It's like your own personal film festival, streaming anytime, anywhere.
And speaking of festivals, the Toronto International Film Festival is happening right now, and there's a world of cinema in Toronto. And the only other place that you could get a world of cinema at your fingertips is on MUBI.
Picture this, you and your closest friends in a screen loaded with hand-picked cinematic gems, all courtesy of MUBI.
Are you bored of the same old movies available every single streaming service? MUBI is the place where you're going to get something that you've never heard of before, and it may just be your next favorite film. You can try MUBI free for 30 days at mubi.com/themoviepodcast. That's mubi.com/themoviepodcast for a whole month of great cinema for free.
And welcome back from that. Thank you to MUBI for sponsoring today's episode. Anthony, I know you had more to talk about, and I know we were discussing earlier too is the synopsis for the film. Do you mind unpacking that for us?
Yeah, for me, it was when you read it, it was the last sentence where you said, or when the synopsis said, the situation that grows rapidly out of control. And I never got to that situation. There are moments of uneasiness and a vibe of something that is going to lead to rapid out of control scenarios, but it never gets there. And there are parts of this film where you have Hugo Weaving as a bar owner who's never really utilized properly. There's a bunch of characters that are just thrown at you, and they have like mischievous vibes, but nothing. They're not mischievous, and it's just like, I don't know if this was a perception thing of how we perceive things. And I know we were talking in the car. We all have a friend that has the worry wart of the friend, and then there's the other one who's not as worried and very chilled back, and that's kind of the dynamic.
And we'll just like do it for the plot type thing,
Exactly, and that's the dynamic of these two characters, where Julia is more of a I'm very not trustworthy. I'm very sick. I want to make sure my environment is safe. Well, Jessica is more of a chill out, just enjoy where you are, trust in people. And there's that dynamic. But again, there's nothing that leads out of that, which is also a really good point of their chemistry, but nothing happens.
It just kind of felt like you're constantly on the edge of your seat, and the characters are reacting and doing things that you don't understand their motive, especially Julie Gardner's character. I'm like, why are you like, I get that you're uneasy. I get that you don't want to be here, but it doesn't also seem like you like, I feel so thrown into your friendship where it's like, did you just meet this character? Are you lifelong friends? How long have you known each other? Because it doesn't seem like you guys like each other that much even. And I wasn't sure about that. They're great in their performances, but together, I don't know how much they really care for each other. And then they have a fight and they have this. And it almost feels like you're just thrown into this middle of this movie. You're trying to create the idea or the backstory for yourself, but it's probably too simple. And it's probably just so straightforward that you're like, oh, okay. Like there's a character reacting to something, grabbing an axe, and you're like, oh, here we go. And then it's like, but the guy is just like walking. Like, why would you go to 0 to 100? Like, it just you kind of feel frustrated watching it.
A lot of leaps in logic, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's funny you mentioned like their friendship and their backstory, because I think when we're first introduced to these two characters, again, like this is not really spoilers for the movie. We see, it starts with Jessica Henwick's character at a party in Sydney, like by the opera house on a boat, and we're told that they don't have money, her card's declining. And then Jessica Henwick goes outside, and then it's Julia Garner's character who's like making out with some random dude, right? So it's almost like we're being told like, oh, she feels like the more carefree one. And then it's also her character when they work in this dive bar in the outback, wherever they are, where they feel like that she's like starts, kissing a guy and like building a relationship with a guy, when she's always feels like she's the one who's like pushing people away and trying to be almost like the mom of the group. So it's almost like it's conflicting with itself a little bit. But I do like that, obviously, that they have like that friction in their friendship, where it's like, yeah, like she feels a certain way. She's very like strict and adamant about like what's going on around her, and she doesn't appreciate the way people talk about her 100%. And then Jessica Henwick's character is like more like, yeah, like we were saying, like she's more go with the flow, be in the environment. But it just feels like the guys in this situation who are very exploitative and just very, vulgar in the way they speak and they speak and how they treat these women. It's like, but then you're okay, like to go out like hours away on a trip with one of them. And it's just like, it's strange. And I get like, you want to show them that they're trying to adjust to their surroundings and stuff, but it also just feels really unsafe. And it feels like these are like bad decisions. And I know this is a more criticism of the decisions of these characters, not of the story choice. But I think the criticisms of the story choices come when there are no consequences to those actions. And when you have characters in this film who feel like they are being preyed upon, where there's literally men going into where they're sleeping and invading their space and breaking doors down to see them, it feels like this is not an environment. Like Julia's character feels like she's being made out to be crazy by Jessica. Like, no, you're fine. It's fine. He's not going to hurt anybody. I'm like, he was just in your house, like where you guys were sleeping. You don't know what was going to happen. And it's just like, it's hard to justify those motives as a story, only because like there's no payoff for it. And I think that's the biggest issue that we're having, is that this movie leads you along and it's telling you the story of like, okay, this is almost like a cautionary tale, but there's no consequences for the tale that they're going on. And I think that's where we're struggling with it, right?
Yeah, I feel that's exactly how I feel. Like when you're the lead up to it, in the situation of where you are in a place where you don't know your surroundings, strange people, I feel like it would lead to something where your life is at risk. And at the end of this, their life wasn't at risk. The hotel was at risk. That's for sure.
Now, before we wrap up today's episode, I need to ask both of you guys, has the Royal Hotel swayed you in any direction on wanting to visit Australia? Because again, as we always make, like literally this morning, I woke up in my house, there was a spider like that was like 2 or 3 inches big, and I'm just like, oh my god, I need to burn my house down. We're clearly in Australia. That's just how they treat fruit flies there, probably. But has this movie swayed you in any direction of wanting to visit Australia?
No, I'd still go to Australia. I'm someone who would travel anywhere in the world. There isn't a place that I wouldn't go.
Even with the giant snakes everywhere?
Even with the giant snakes anywhere. Yeah, I'd go to North Korea even.
Wow, that's a choice.
Interesting.
I don't know if you're allowed to go there, I'll be honest with you.
You can, from what I understand. There are like tours available. It's just like super restricted. But I mean, not saying that I'm booking a flight tomorrow, but if the opportunity were arise, I wouldn't say no.
Okay, good to know. Anthony, how about yourself?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with Australia. I think my biggest fear is like what lives on the island, and the spiders and the snakes and every deadly animal to ever lives on that freaking that island. So I would definitely love to go. I just wouldn't be caught in a situation where I'm in a very barren land of Australia where it's desert and no reception. Yeah, because there's so many things that could lead into it, and I just could not be in that type of control where I can get myself out of. Like without a phone, without cellular service, there's no way. I would never I'm not like a mountain man. I'm not going to like the remotes.
No, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that.
And that's we feel, and just so it doesn't feel like we're coming for Australia, like that is like that's how we feel anywhere, even in Canada. Even we go an hour away outside the city sometimes, we're just like, oh, this feels very different because it's just like remote and there's just fields everywhere. I'm just like, who knows what's out here.
The only reason would probably be for the stars, and they do showcase that in this movie. But other than that, I've been to Michigan, and I can get the stars really, really nice in the farm in the prairie area of Michigan, and just a vivid memory that I had. But yeah, that would be the only reason I would go to a barren area, just because there's no light.
Not to go work. Like
I would leave after I saw the lights, the stars. And
here's the thing, Michigan, after watching Barbarian, even now I'm just like, maybe would I go to Michigan? I don't know. But I think that's also one of the things that we spoke about after watching this film was that, you know, it would have been nice to get some backstory, because when you're going like, oh, there's no cellular service, there's no text messaging, there's no email, there's no nothing. We don't know where they're coming from, who they're talking to, what their home life is like. So them being cut off from cellular service, it never felt like an issue in the movie that came up. Or, you know, there's a scene in the film where they eventually get service in this part of Australia that they go to visit. But it's like, there's never been a situation where it felt like they were unable to call or get help, because it never felt like that urgency was there for it, right? So maybe if we knew more about their home life and who they're talking to, would have helped.
And the backstory, you're completely correct, because they point to a backstory that never leads to anything. It's like there was something that they were escaping from their house, from their home, to be in this situation, but we never know why. So there needs to be a backstory. There needs to be something, so you can give the audience some sort of foundation to why you are doing what you're doing, because we don't know why you're doing what you're doing.
Exactly. But let us know if you're catching this movie at TIFF. Let us know if we're wrong. Let us know if we missed something. Give us your perspective. We'd love to know. Leave us a comment on this episode if you're listening on Spotify. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment below. Let us know. We want to know more. We want to get more insights on it. And of course, join our Discord. We're having some great conversations in there. This is the first of many TIFF interviews, or sorry, not the first, because there's more that's come out already. But this is just one of many interviews and reviews and episodes dedicated to TIFF that we have going on right now. So make sure you check out all of the incredible coverage that is coming out of TIFF 2023 from the MUBI podcast. You're in the best spot for movies. Stay here. Let us know if you like the show. Leave us 5 stars on wherever you're listening to us, and make sure you're following us on all social media platforms at the MUBI podcast. Like we said throughout the show, this episode is sponsored by MUBI. If you want to get 1 month free of incredible cinema, check out our show notes below. It helps the show out a lot, and we'd be so grateful for it. That was this time with the MUBI podcast, and we'll see you next.